Greetings friends, my name is Pavel Shtermoch and now we'll dive in the top news of this day. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe recognized the Holodomor of 1932-1933 as a genocide of the Ukrainian people.
Restoring historical justice and paying tribute to Holodomor victims sends a message that justice is inevitable for all past and present Moscow's crimes. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Twitter.
The PACE decision is a step long awaited in Ukraine for the sake of historical justice and commemoration of the victims of the totalitarian regime. The real numbers of the dead were suppressed, which is confirmed by the order given by the authorities not to register the deaths of children under the age of 1 year. Ukrainians between the ages of 6 months and 17 years were about half of all Holodomor victims. In this regard, the average life expectancy of Ukrainians in 1933 was 7.3 years for men and 10.9 years for women. In the entire history of mankind, such indicators have not been recorded anywhere. During 2022-2023, more than a dozen countries around the world, as well as the European Parliament, recognized the Holodomor as genocide. This indicates a rethinking of this crime in the context of the current full-scale aggression of Russia against Ukraine. The PACE actually changes its position formulated in the resolution of April 28, 2010, where the Holodomor was called a crime against humanity but not genocide. Denial of genocide is the path to its repetition. By the way, the Holodomor of the 1930s is one of the reasons for modern Russian war against Ukraine. Look at the map of the most affected areas and you will see that it is very similar to the temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine. The Kremlin always tries to convince everyone that in this war it tries to preserve the Russian-speaking population. But ask yourself, how did the Russian-speaking people appear on the territory of Ukraine at all? I will tell you, in a territory where the majority of the population died out, people from distant regions were imported, and thus the ethnic composition changed. The Russians continue this policy even now. All Ukrainian-speaking or pro-Ukrainian people in the occupied territories are persecuted, tortured, killed, and deported. Moscow did not condemn or recognize the responsibility of the Stalinist regime for the Holodomor and is now committing a new genocide against Ukrainians. The Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation decided to create a permanent deployment point in temporarily occupied territory of Georgia. Russia is setting up a naval base for the evacuation of fleet forces from the temporarily occupied Crimea. The escape of the Russian Black Sea Fleet from Crimea is a consequence of successful Ukrainian attacks on Russian ships and military infrastructure, in particular on the headquarters in Sevastopol. For example, today the Ukrainian Navy and the Security Service attacked Russian cruise missile carrier. With the help of naval drones, the Security Service claims that both vessels were hit and received significant damage. In Russia, these statements are not confirmed, and they say that everything is in order with the ships. Crimea is an internationally recognized territory of Ukraine. Without the deoccupation of the peninsula, there can be no talk of the restoration of justice and the implementation of the principles of international law. Russia systematically violates the rights of the population on Crimea. Those disloyal to the occupation, both real and alleged, are brutally persecuted. Religious Muslims especially suffer from the Russian occupation of Crimea, labeled as terrorists by the occupation authorities and sentenced to unprecedented terms of imprisonment. Contrary to the Geneva Conventions, Russia mobilizes Ukrainian citizens in the occupied Crimea to its own armed formations and forces them to fight against Ukraine. The temporarily occupied Crimea served as a springboard for Russia's full-scale invasion of mainland Ukraine. Without the return of the peninsula under the control of Ukraine, there will be a threat of a repetition of this scenario.
No one is going to leave the residents of Crimea just like that, and when certain strikes are carried out on the territory of Crimea, this will not end. There will be a ground operation, there will be a return of our territories. Soon, everyone who is waiting will return home. Kirill Budanov, head of the main Directorate of Intelligence of Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.
Russia systematically attacks mainland Ukraine from the territory of the temporarily occupied Crimea. According to the International Center for Black Sea Studies, within 9 months of 2023, the following was launched from the territory of Crimea and the adjacent water area. 230 units of sea-based cruise missiles of the Caliber type, 590 Shahed UAVs, 40 Iskander-type ballistic missiles, 17 Onyx anti-ship missiles. And we cannot have such a danger near our borders, and therefore Crimea must be liberated. Defending its territory and freedom, Ukraine is fighting for justice and security for all countries and peoples of the world. The victory of Ukraine will mean the restoration of the effectiveness of international law and the defeat of neocolonialism. Ukraine is making great efforts to establish partnership with the countries of Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. A number of visits to these regions were made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba. President Volodymyr Zelensky also took part in a summit in Jeddah. Despite its own difficult situation due to Russian aggression, Ukraine continues contributing to global security and stability. Ukraine managed to break the Russian blockade to continue exporting affordable food, helping to fight hunger in the world. We also are watching the escalation of the conflict in the Gaza Strip with concern and pain. Hamas terrorist massacres against civilians in Israel repeat the atrocities of the Russian army in Bucha, Irpin, or on the Zhytomyr highway, and elsewhere in Ukraine since 2022. Hamas's attempts to deny the obvious facts of mass killings of civilians are as foolish as the attempts of Russian propaganda to hide the responsibility of the occupiers for atrocities against Ukrainians. Russian propaganda has openly sided with terrorism and already declares Israelis to be fascists.
Why is it Russia that appears to be the basic consultant and the main stakeholder in Hamas? The technological specificity of action during Black Saturday and the final goal: fear, intimidation, attacks on civilian settlements, distraction, and multiple use of terrorist tools. The world community quickly and clearly voiced a common and the only correct position: evil is evil. It has no excuses and justifiable reason. That means that the pendulum has swung and will return to its initiators. The terrorists will be eliminated, and Western political will mobilize even more in support of Ukraine and Israel. Mikhail Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, on Twitter.
Forces that seek to plunge the world into chaos in order to replace international law with their own hegemony are interested in prolonging the conflict in the Gaza Strip too. To achieve their goals, they are ready to even hide behind anti-colonial rhetoric. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay updated. Subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support is that really matters. Goodbye.